All right, now that the top part's out of the way, positioning a light and pointing a light are by far the toughest parts of working with lights inside of Photoshop. Now we're going to normalize the scene by changing the color of the light. We're also going to open up the shadows. You'll see what a big difference that makes. And finally, we're going to modify the attenuation, which is the range of the light. I've saved my progress as crazyblueroom.psd, found inside the 15 lighting folder. And with the ray tracing turned on, so you can get a sense of the difference that each one of these modifications makes, I'm going to, here inside the 3D panel, switch over to Filter by Lights, make sure that light bulb is selected, and I'm also going to switch to the light tool so that I can see the geometry of the light. And now I'm going to drop down here to this color option. And you can assign color to a light if you want to inside of Photoshop, and we sure as heck should where this light is concerned for two reasons. First of all, an incandescent light has a sort of yellowish glow to it. And also, we can use that yellowish glow, since it's a complementary color to blue, to try to defeat some of this overwhelming blue light that's being cast by the shade. Another option would be to change the color of the material of the shade if we wanted to, but I actually like this blue shade, so I'm going to stick with it. Anyway, I'm going to click on the color swatch here. And the color I want you to dial in, if you're working along with me, is 50 degrees for the hue value, so we get a shade of yellow. And I'm going to take the saturation value up to 25%, so it's a very pale yellow, and leave brightness set to 100%, then click OK. And let Photoshop do a little bit of ray tracing here, and we'll see that we still have a crazy amount of blue going on inside of the scene. We've just cast a little bit of yellow inside of it, and so now it's become more green. That's not what I want, of course, so I'll go ahead and click inside the scene or press Escape in order to interrupt the ray trace. Now, notice that I've got Create Shadows turned on so that we are casting shadows inside the scene. I definitely want that, but I don't want the shadows to be this harsh because right now we're catching everything. Notice this line that's going across the end table. Well, that's the shadow that's being cast by the wire around the light bulb. And if we go ahead and soften that shadow a little bit, not only will it become a lot less harsh, of course, our shadows won't be nearly as crisp, but also we'll lose some of the thinner shadows. They'll just basically blur away. So check this out. I'm going to change the softness value to 5%, very low value, and you'll see what a terrific difference it makes inside of the scene. I've completely managed to break up that wire shadow there, and it's also going a long way to breaking up that blue shadow that's being created by the lampshade. Now, bear in mind, when you're looking at a ray trace like this, anywhere where you see noise is going to end up being rendered out as softness. So each pass of the progressive render ends up smoothing out that noise. All right, so I'm going to click inside the scene, press Escape in order to interrupt that ray trace, and I'll go ahead and take the softness value, let's say up to 10%. And notice now that we have noise all over the place. Again, that will be rendered as blurriness. But we've pretty much blurred away the lampshade entirely. We're not seeing that high degree of blueness associated with the scene. All right, I'm going to click again, and I'm going to take the softness value all the way up to 25% in order to basically eliminate the lampshade. So we're still seeing the lampshade, and it still looks blue, but it's no longer creating this freaky blue effect inside of the scene. All right, I'm going to press the Escape key in order to interrupt the ray trace, and I'm going to fire up the intensity value to 2. So basically doubling the intensity of this light source, because I ultimately want it to look like, in this case, a lone lamp inside the scene, which delivers a pretty harsh effect, but bear in mind that we'll ultimately be adding some can lights, which will go a long ways towards smoothing out the lighting. All right, finally, I'm going to press the Escape key again, and I'm going to drop down to the Use Attenuation checkbox. Now, what this does is it allows you to create a drop-off where your lighting is concerned. Attenuation, by the way, is applicable to point lights and spotlights, not to infinite lights. And what it means is if I turn on Use Attenuation, and then I'll just go ahead and click for a moment in order to interrupt the ray trace, we're seeing a point at which the light is rendered at full intensity. So in this case, inner is set to 88.98. So 88.98% away from the light remains at full strength. And then the outer value here is 266.95. So 266.95% the way out, it completely drops away. And in between, we have a gradual reduction in that light source. All right, I'm going to change the inner value because I want a really tight light bulb. I'm going to change the inner value to 10. And notice, by the way, if I go ahead and click inside the scene to interrupt here, that reduces the size of the geometry, those rings around the light. And also, if I click inside this inner value, you see this first ring on this little icon here, the first ring lights up. So I'll move my cursor back in there. And that shows you that is where the inner attenuation is. It's just sort of a graphical depiction, don't you know? And then if I click an outer, we see the bottom ring highlights, which is telling us that this is the end of the light source. And I'm going to increase that outer value to 300. And then I'll go ahead and press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac, and I'll let the scene render. And you can now see that we have a much softer effect. It's still a harsh effect because, after all, we're working with a single incandescent light bulb inside of the scene. But we have softened the effect dramatically so it no longer appears weird and artificial. We now have a scene that is pretty representative of something we would see if we were trying to light an entire bedroom using just a desk lamp and nothing more. All right, I'm going to go ahead and press the Escape key once again to interrupt that ray tracing. In the next exercise, we're going to brighten the scene still more using a combination of material attributes, specifically reflection, gloss, and shine.